Every word she typed felt like a betrayal, a dagger to her own heart, but it was a necessary shield for her career. In her neat-as-a-pin cubicle, the only sound was the click-clack of the keyboard, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. 17 times she'd written this letter. 17 times she'd hit delete. Each version felt more useless than the last. The cursor blinked, a tiny, pulsing heartbeat on the screen, just mocking her. It was a simple document, a resignation letter, but to Jennifer Brooks, it felt like a confession, a surrender, and an act of self-preservation all rolled into one. Her hands were trembling, and not from the office's overactive AC. It was the searing memory of the night before. Paris, the city of lights, had exposed a part of her she thought she'd buried under layers of ambition, and it had exposed a side of him she never knew existed. Jeffrey, the CEO, her boss, a man who seemed to be carved from ice and ambition, whose approval she'd been chasing for 3 long years. After last night, what other choice was there? She had to resign. It was the only way to protect what was left of her career, and the only way to salvage her own sanity. She finally hit print. The warm paper felt like a death sentence in her cold hands. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm her racing pulse, she stood, smoothed down her pencil skirt, and walked the long, silent corridor to the corner office, the lion's den. She knocked once. A crisp "Enter" sliced the silence, and there he was, Jeffrey, framed by the panoramic window overlooking the sprawling New York City skyline. He didn't even look up, his eyes glued to a document on his massive mahogany desk. He was exactly as he always was, imposing, immaculate in his tailored suit, his face an unreadable mask of corporate power. It was impossible to believe this was the same man whose guard had completely crumbled for a few stolen hours in Paris. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice much steadier than she felt. He finally looked up, his gray eyes pinning her to the spot. There wasn't a flicker of recognition, no hint of the intimacy they'd shared. Nothing, just a cold, professional gaze that made her stomach clench. "Brooks," he acknowledged. She placed the letter on his desk. "This is my 2 weeks' notice. I am resigning from my position as your executive assistant." He didn't even touch it. He just leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers as a long, agonizing silence stretched between them. She could hear her own blood pounding in her ears. Then he spoke, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "No." Jennifer blinked. "I'm sorry?" He said, "No," he repeated, each word sharp and deliberate. "Your resignation is rejected." He pushed the letter back across the desk toward her. "I don't want an easy way out of this, Jennifer. If we're going to say goodbye, it won't be with a piece of paper. You'll look me in the eye and tell me it meant nothing." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "But you won't. So go back to your desk. We have work to do." It all started, as cliches often do, in Paris, but there was nothing cliché about the multi-billion-dollar merger they were there to close. As his executive assistant, Jennifer had been working around the clock for months, coordinating schedules, preparing briefs thicker than novels, and anticipating every need of her notoriously demanding boss, and she thrived on it. In a corporate world dominated by white men, Jennifer Brooks, a brilliant black woman who'd been underestimated her whole career, survived by being smarter, faster, and more prepared than anyone else. The final day of negotiations was brutal. 12 hours in a sterile boardroom, fueled by stale coffee and tension so thick you could taste it. Jennifer was a silent shadow, passing notes, pulling up data, a seamless extension of Jeffrey's will. And then it was done. They'd won. The relief in the room was like a champagne cork popping after being shaken way too long. That night, Jeffrey did something he'd never done. He invited her to the celebratory dinner, not as a note-taker, but as a guest. "You were instrumental in this, Jennifer," he'd said, his voice lacking its usual hard edge. "You deserve to be here." At the lavish restaurant, surrounded by the triumphant roar of men in expensive suits, Jennifer felt something shift. Jeffrey, who normally treated her with a cool, professional distance, kept looking at her. He'd refill her wine, his fingers brushing hers. He'd lean in close to be heard, his breath warm against her ear, sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Later, the rest of the team retired for the night, but Jeffrey turned to her and simply said, "Walk with me." They strolled along the Seine, the city lights dancing on the dark water. The silence between them was different now, not the professional quiet of the office, but a heavy, charged space filled with everything they hadn't said. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. He'd shed his CEO armor. He wasn't the ruthless corporate titan. He was just a man, tired and relieved, silhouetted against the Eiffel Tower. "It's my job."
The office, once her sanctuary, had become a minefield. Every glance felt like an accusation. The air crackled with a tension only she and Jeffrey seemed to understand. He was a master of the public facade, treating her with the same demanding efficiency as always. But then she'd catch him. In a meeting, his eyes would linger on her a second too long, or as she handed him a report, his fingers would brush hers, a spark of heat that was both a reminder and a threat. The push and pull was maddening. One afternoon, she was struggling with a spreadsheet, her head pounding, when he was suddenly standing by her desk. The entire office seemed to hold its breath. "You're frowning," he stated, his voice low. "Numbers not adding up?" "I'll handle it, Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone clipped. He leaned down, his presence overwhelming her small space. "You're thinking too loud again, Jennifer. I can hear you from my office." It was an echo of Paris, a deliberate grenade tossed into their professional workspace. Before she could respond, he pointed to a single cell on her screen. "There's your error. Wrong quarter." He tapped the screen, then straightened up, his corporate mask back in place. "Fix it," he commanded, and walked away, leaving her breathless and the office buzzing. The buzzing grew to a roar with the return of Vanessa Cole. Vanessa was the VP of marketing and, as office legend had it, Jeffrey's long-term, on-again, off-again girlfriend. She was everything Jennifer wasn't. Tall, blonde, with an ambition sharper than her stilettos. Her return was like a shift in the atmospheric pressure. Vanessa appeared at Jennifer's cubicle, leaning against the partition like she owned it. "So, you're the new miracle worker?" she purred, her cool eyes scanning Jennifer's desk. "Jeffrey has been singing your praises, a rarity." "I just do my job, Miss Cole," Jennifer said, keeping her eyes on her monitor. "Oh, I'm sure you do," the insinuation hanging in the air. "Paris was a huge success, I hear. He can be very persuasive when he wants something. You must have worked very closely together." Every word was a carefully aimed dart. Vanessa was marking her territory. Jennifer felt a cold anger rise inside her. Here was a stereotype in a designer suit trying to paint her as a woman who'd slept her way into the boss's good graces. "We worked professionally," Jennifer replied, her voice dangerously calm. "The results speak for themselves." Vanessa's smile tightened. "Of course. Well, I just wanted to put a face to the name. We'll be seeing a lot of each other, I'm sure, especially with Jeffrey and I reconnecting." She sauntered away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and toxic insinuation in her wake. The office had become a chessboard, and Jennifer felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, trapped between a ruthless CEO and his equally ruthless ex. The flight to Seattle was controlled torture. They sat in first class, an armrest separating them that felt as wide as the sky outside. Jeffrey was absorbed in his work. Jennifer tried to focus on her own documents, but the words just swam before her eyes. This was his design. She knew it. He'd manufactured this forced proximity to break her, to force her to acknowledge the energy that crackled between them, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. In the boardroom, they were a formidable team. Jennifer was always 10 steps ahead, anticipating the data he'd need. He was a master negotiator, dissecting arguments and relentlessly pushing for advantage. They moved in a seamless, unspoken rhythm. "You two read each other's minds," one of the Cascade Tech VPs remarked with a laugh. Jennifer just smiled politely, her heart hammering against her ribs. The nights were worse. They'd work late in the hotel's business suite, fueled by room service coffee. As exhaustion set in, the professional facade began to fray. One night, well past midnight, they were going over the final points for the next day.
"We're exposed on Section 5, Jeffrey said, rubbing his temples. "I know," Jennifer said, pointing to a clause she'd already highlighted. "I drafted an alternative framework. It shores up our liability without conceding the IP rights." She slid it to him. He read it, and a slow, genuine smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen since Paris. "This is brilliant, Jennifer." "It's my job," she said, her automatic defense. He looked up, his gray eyes soft in the dim light. "No, it's not. Your job is to support me. This is leading. You saved us." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering city. "The pressure of this, sometimes it feels like it's going to crush me." It was a stunning admission, a crack in his armor. She found herself walking over to stand beside him. "You don't have to carry it all alone," she heard herself say. He turned to face her, the space between them shrinking. "What if I don't want to?" he murmured. He reached out, his fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric. She couldn't pull away. His eyes searched hers, and he started to lean in, his gaze dropping to her lips. The world seemed to shrink to the few inches that separated them. Just then, his phone buzzed, a harsh, intrusive sound. The moment shattered. He flinched back as if burned, his mask slamming back into place. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. "It's Vanessa," he said, his voice once again cool and distant. "There's a problem with the marketing projections." He didn't look at her as he answered, turning his back and walking into the other room. "Cole, what is it?" Jennifer stood there, trembling. He had pulled her in, shown her a glimpse of the man behind the CEO, only to shove her away the second the outside world intruded. It was a cruel, relentless game, and she was beginning to fear the only outcome was her own destruction. What would you do? The ruthless CEO keeps pulling her in and pushing her away, while his ambitious ex circles like a shark? Is this a power game, or is there something real under all that corporate armor? Comment below if you think she should fight for this connection, or if she should just run and never look back.
The Cascade Tech acquisition was a success. They returned to New York bound by an even more complex web of tension. The deal's success only raised Jennifer's profile, which made her a bigger target for Vanessa Cole. The flashpoint came at the quarterly town hall. The entire New York office was there. Jeffrey was on stage presenting the stellar results when he gave a special mention to the Cascade Tech team, naming Jennifer personally. And special thanks to my executive assistant, Jennifer Brooks, whose strategic insights were not just supportive, but pivotal to the successful outcome, he said, his eyes finding hers in the crowd. A polite applause rippled through the room, but Jennifer felt her face flush. It was too much praise, too public. It was ammunition, and she knew exactly who was about to fire the gun. During the Q&A, a hand shot up. It was Vanessa, poised and predatory in a blood-red dress. She was handed a microphone. "Jeffrey, a fantastic quarter," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "And congratulations on the acquisition. It's clear you had a very dedicated team. So dedicated, in fact, I have to wonder if the company's strict policies on professional conduct and fraternization were fully observed during the extensive travel required." A collective gasp went through the auditorium. The air crackled. It was a direct public assault. She didn't use Jennifer's name, but she didn't have to. Every eye in the room swiveled from Vanessa to a stone-faced Jeffrey and then to Jennifer, who felt like 1,000 spotlights were searing her skin. It was a masterfully cruel move, a corporate assassination disguised as a concerned question. It put Jeffrey in an impossible position: defend Jennifer and admit something was going on, or throw her under the bus to protect the company. Jennifer's world tilted. This was it, the end of her career, the public humiliation she'd fought so hard to avoid. She locked eyes with Jeffrey across the vast room. His face was unreadable. For one terrifying second, she thought he would sacrifice her. Jeffrey stood silent on the stage, the entire company holding its breath. He let Vanessa's insinuation hang in the air, letting its ugliness fester, letting everyone see her for what she was. When he finally spoke, his voice was deceptively calm but laced with steel. "Thank you for your question, Vanessa. It gives me an opportunity to clarify something.
His gaze swept the room before landing deliberately on Jennifer. Our company policy on professional conduct is designed to prevent abuses of power. It is not a tool for corporate blackmail or to be weaponized for personal vendettas. A murmur went through the crowd. Vanessa's perfect smile faltered. He wasn't finished. Jennifer Brooks is one of the most brilliant, professional, and ethical people I have ever worked with. Her contribution to this company is immeasurable. The success of the Cascade deal was due to her talent. Full stop. Then he turned his full attention to Vanessa, his eyes turning to ice. As for your concern about conduct, perhaps you should be more concerned with your own. I find it unprofessional to use a public forum to air baseless, malicious insinuations against a colleague. This behavior has no place here. He leaned forward. We'll discuss your future with the company in my office immediately. It was a public execution. He had not only defended Jennifer, but he had celebrated her and destroyed her attacker in the same breath. He turned the very ruthlessness that made people fear him into a shield to protect her. He chose her, publicly, unambiguously, in front of everyone. Vanessa stood frozen, her face pale with shock, before she practically threw the microphone at a stagehand and stormed out. The town hall ended abruptly in a frenzy of shocked chatter, but Jennifer didn't hear any of it. All she could hear was the frantic, hopeful beating of her own heart. Later that evening, Jennifer was packing her briefcase, ready to flee. Her office phone rang. It was him. "Don't leave," he said quietly. "Come up." She found him on his private balcony, the city lights a glittering promise at their feet. He'd loosened his tie and his jacket was gone. The hard mask of the CEO was gone, replaced by the vulnerable man she'd seen in Paris. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough, "for all of it, for putting you through that, for Vanessa, for being a coward." She just looked at him, unable to speak. "I rejected your resignation, Jennifer, and it was the most selfish thing I've ever done. I told myself it was because you were too valuable to lose. That was a lie. The truth is, I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. The thought of you walking out that door and never seeing you again was unacceptable." He was standing right in front of her now, gently taking her trembling hands in his. "That night in Paris wasn't a mistake. It was the most real thing that's happened to me in years, and it scared me to death. So I tried to push you away, to keep you in the neat little box labeled assistant. But it's impossible. You don't fit in any box." He looked into her eyes, his own shining with an intensity that stole her breath. "I don't want to be your boss anymore, Jennifer. I don't want to play these games. I just want you. If you'll give me a real chance, a chance to win your heart, the right way." Tears she didn't know she was holding back began to fall, not of frustration or fear this time, but of relief. In that moment, he wasn't the ruthless CEO. He was just Jeffrey, and she was just Jennifer. And for the first time, their two worlds didn't feel like they were colliding. They felt like they were finally, perfectly aligning. "Okay," she whispered, a watery smile breaking through the tears. "Okay, Jeffrey." He smiled, a real, breathtaking smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. And then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't like the frantic, desperate kiss in Paris. This was slow and deep and full of promise. A promise of a new beginning, high above the city that had almost torn them apart. If you loved this story of a love that broke all the rules, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more romance stories just like this. And don't forget to comment with your thoughts. In the high-stakes world of love and business, do you think sometimes you have to risk it all for a chance at true happiness? Let us know.